the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. It's where we ended last week, and it's where we pick up this week. And it's because of that blessing, that what we call the blessing of Aaron, or the Aaronic blessing. It's because of that blessing that you and I are called to live differently. Yesterday afternoon, I was in the office looking at these slides, working through my message, praying. And if you could see my desk, looking for the sandwich that's been missing for a week. But anyway, I had a knock on the door. And I yelled, "Come in," thinking it was somebody that knew. But finally, I went to the door, and there was a motorhome parked in the church parking lot. And there was an older couple standing at the door. And the wife was in tears. They were completely frustrated. They had driven into town from the north, really the northwest, coming down from Oskaloosa direction. And their directions that they had to get to Missouri said, stay on Highway 63. So they turned off up here at the 4-lane and got on Business 63 and came past the church. And when they were standing on the doorstep, they said, "We've been past your church 4 times in the last 50 minutes. They said, "We're completely lost. We don't know how to get out of this town. We don't know how to get to Missouri on Highway 63. They were completely flustered and frustrated and in every way just at their wits' end. And I said, come in. Oh, they said, "This is your house." I said, "No, this is an office." And they came in, and I had them sit down at the front desk, and I turned the computer screen toward them, and I brought up the map of Ottumwa, and I told them where they were, and I showed them the route that they needed to take, cross the river, make a left-hand turn, go past the John Deere plant, and then hang right on the ramp, and it's going to take you south on 63 to Bloomfield, etc. They didn't understand. They said, "We've done that twice. We've gone past that John Deere plant twice." And I said, "On the 4-lane?" And they said, "No, we were on a 2-lane surface street." I said, "Well, you were on the wrong side of the John Deere plant. You need..." And finally I said, "Look, I'll just get in my car and you follow me." No, says the husband. The wife is sitting there at the desk. But the husband wouldn't hear of it. They finally took a picture with their phone of what was on the screen of the map, and I gave them my business card. I said, call me on the cell phone. If you get turned around again, just stop, and I'll come to where you are, and I'll get you on Highway 63 South. And in the middle of all that, I was reminded of how much you and I depend on our intentions rather than our directions. I mean, their intention was to get to Missouri, but their intention was so strong and so motivating that they forgot to read the signs. They were just headed out. And I think of the times when I've sat with people and talked with people about this tension between intention and direction. And I said, you could get out here on the highway, and you could make a left turn down at the stoplight after you cross the river, and you could tell me that you have every intention of going to Los Angeles, but I would say, no, you're traveling in the direction of Chicago. And you could have the best intentions of the world to get to Los Angeles, but you're headed toward Chicago. Paul is really concerned when he's writing the churches about this tension. And I reveal some of my bias. We don't know who the author of the letter to the Hebrews is in the New Testament. I think it was Paul, or at the very least, Luke, who was with Paul and used some of Paul's vocabulary and sentence structure in this letter. But at any rate, in the 12th chapter of this letter to the Hebrews, the 12th chapter starts out with this word, therefore. And here is the challenge that you and I have. We cannot overlook this word. We dare not overlook the word therefore when it appears in the text. We need to go back and find out what it's there for. So you go back and you look at the 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews, and we find out that faith is the firm foundation under everything that makes life worth living. The firm foundation under which everything that's worth living is found by faith. We see the world all around us, the world that's been called into existence by what we can't see. By faith, Abel offered a better sacrifice to God than Cain. By an act of faith, Enoch skipped death entirely. By faith, Noah built a ship when he wasn't even close to even a lake. By an act of faith, Abraham left his home and traveled to an unknown destination that would become his home. By faith, Sarah, who was childless, was able to become pregnant, even though she was really old, and her son becomes the forerunner to millions and millions and millions of people. By faith, Abraham offered Isaac back to God. By faith, Isaac reached into the future and blesses Jacob and Esau. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, when he was 40 years old, turned his back on Egypt, even though that meant that he was being indifferent to Pharaoh. By faith, the Israelites marched through the Red Sea on dry ground. By faith, the people of Israel marched around the city of Jericho until the walls fell flat. And there are so many more. There are so many more. There's Barak and Samson and Gideon and Samuel and David and all the prophets. Through acts of faith. Through acts of faith, they toppled kingdoms. They made justice work. They took promises for themselves. They were protected from lions and fires and swords and turned disadvantage to advantage. They won battles and routed alien armies. Therefore, because of all those things, since we are surrounded by that incredibly huge cloud of witnesses, all those people that have gone on before us, because we're surrounded by all them, let us throw off everything that hinders us, everything that keeps us from being prepared, everything that draws us into sin that tangles us up. Let us throw all that off. You know, the imagery here is a really ancient image, okay? The men in the time when this letter was being written, the men wore long flowing robes. And in order to move someplace in a hurry, they would reach down and they would pick up the bottom of that robe and they would tuck it into their belt so that they could run, because it's impossible to run with long robes around your feet. And that's the image here. Paul is saying, don't get tangled up. Don't trip over your own clothes. Wait, stop. Take advantage of all the preparation time that you have. Don't get all tangled up in all the sin and stuff in the world that you live in. Don't get tangled up in that. Instead, run the race. Run the race with perseverance. Run the race with perseverance because the race is marked out for us. Did you know that your race is marked out for you? It is. It is. I remember as a student in Bible college, I remember all the talk about people wanting to do God's will. And I got caught up in it. Oh, I got to find out what God's will is. I got to find out what God's will is. What is God's will for my life? And then I had somebody point out that it was already clear. Jesus pointed out exactly what the race is for us, what the path is for us. He mapped it out. He says it before he ascends into heaven. He says, now you, that's me and you, now you, go all over and share what I have shared with you. Share everything I have shared with you. Make followers, make more Jesus followers because you share this information. And then baptize them and help them begin a lifetime of following Jesus, of running this race, of being part of this marathon. Jesus says, this is what you're to do. And yet, man, I've seen people spend years trying to figure out what God's will is for their life, trying to figure out what He wants them to do. Just go do what Jesus has already told us to do. And let the other things fall into place. God gave you a free will. If you're walking with Jesus, if you're following Jesus, all those other decisions will fall into place. He'll help you make the good decisions about, who you should marry, what house you should buy, what job you should have. All those other decisions, they just fall into place as we follow Jesus. And especially if we follow the advice of the writer of Hebrews, who says, run the race, but when you run the race, keep your eye on the prize. Fix your eyes on Jesus, who is the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Now, friends, keeping our eyes on Jesus is really hard. It's really hard. Because of all the years I spent working with and mentoring pastors, and some of these pastors I still serve as a mentor for, I hear about things that happen in their lives and happen in their churches, and here's what I want you to know. Following Jesus, fixing your eyes on Jesus, means you got to take your eyes off everybody else and all the institutions that get messed up in the process. If you're following me as a pastor, please be aware that I am a sinner. I'm a sinner. I acknowledge my sin. I acknowledge my faults. I've shared many of them with you over the last 10 years. And I acknowledge that. I don't want you to follow me as much as I want you to follow the Jesus that I follow. I don't want you to follow our institution of the church. I don't want you to follow our denomination. That's not what we're called to do. We're called to follow Jesus. And if we get distracted by all the bad stuff that's happening around us and in the lives of church leaders and in churches and in the denominations and all the stuff that's going on, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. We won't be able to live out the grace and peace and blessing of God in that Aaronic blessing, because we'll be so distracted by all the stuff that's going on around us. You see, Jesus showed us how to do this. The writer of Hebrews goes on, he says, for the joy set before him, for the joy that was set before Jesus, for the promise that Jesus had that he would one day return to the Father, for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross, scorning its shame. Now you gotta just take a pause here, because we don't really understand the cultural implication of what shame meant. Shame in the Middle Eastern culture in the time when this was written, and even today, shame is to be avoided at all costs. It's why even today we learn about honor killings, where families will kill someone because they shamed the family. Shame is to be avoided at all costs. But the writer of Hebrews says Jesus willingly, sacrificially, obediently took shame upon himself. He endured that shame. We think so often about the pain of Jesus being nailed to a cross, of them dropping that cross in a hole with a jolt, of the muscles and tendons ripping and tearing when Jesus was crucified. But we hardly ever think about the shame that he took on himself. You see, he took on the shame of your sin. He took on the shame of my sin. He took on that shame. He wore that shame. He bore that shame. And then, not only did he die naked, hanging on a cross in excruciating pain, but he rose again. He emptied the grave. And in power, he revealed himself to over 400 people. And then, in their sight, he rose up through the clouds, and today he sits at the right hand of the throne of God. When I consider this, when I consider what this means, I can't help but think about Jesus' words to his disciples. That's us. We're followers. If you've decided to follow Jesus, if you've pledged your loyalty and direction to him, if that's what you've done, then Jesus says these words to you. He says, take up your cross and follow me. Take up your cross and follow me. It was 15 years ago, this weekend, that Lois and I sat in a room in the University Hospital up in Iowa City after the oncologist and his team had walked out of the room and told us that Lois had stage 4 colon cancer, that nobody'd caught it, and that she had 2 years or less to live. And we sat there in shock. There's just no other way to describe it. We sat there in shock. And the only thing that both of us thought of at the same time was, okay, we have a choice. We can either pick up this cross or we can just walk away. We made several decisions in that hospital room that day. Number one, we would never refer to a battle with cancer or a fight with cancer. We decided this was a journey with cancer. It was a journey. It wasn't going to be a battle. The battle had already been won. The battle had already been won. And we thought of a translation that we really liked of this verse, where Jesus says, "Take up your cross and follow me." You know, one translator translates it this way. He says, "Don't run from suffering. Don't run from suffering. Don't run from suffering. Instead, embrace it." Jesus says, embrace the suffering. Don't run away from it. That's against everything that you've ever thought of. You want to get away from everything that's bad. And Jesus comes along and says, no, take up your cross, embrace the suffering. And he says, then follow me and I'll show you how. And he did. And he does. And he's never stopped. Follow me. I'll show you how to embrace the suffering. Follow me. I'll show you how to take up your cross. Take up your cross and follow me. The writer of Hebrews goes on and he says, consider the one who endured such opposition from sinners. The very church people, the Pharisees, who should have rejoiced at the arrival of the Messiah, were the ones who demanded that Pilate kill him. He endured the opposition of sinners. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, and next slide, please, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So that I won't grow weary and lose heart. Don't grow weary in the middle of this, my friends. Don't expect that when you think about the Aaronic blessing, that God's going to bless you and be gracious to you and give you peace. Don't think that means everything is going to be nice and safe and comfortable and easy. It's not. It's not. And if somebody has sold you that bill of goods, I apologize, because that's not the gospel. That is not the gospel. I'm going to say that again. If somebody has sold you a bill of goods that following Jesus takes away all your problems and means you're never going to have another problem, that's a lie, and that's a lie from Satan. And if you bought that lie, you need to turn back to the real Jesus, who says, take up your cross and follow me. And you need, in the middle of this, so that you don't grow weary and lose heart, you need a shot of epinephrine. You know, epinephrine is just adrenaline. And you know, when somebody's having a heart attack and they can't figure out any other way to stop it, they will often take a syringe with epinephrine, with adrenaline in it, and shoot it right into the heart to try to stimulate that heart. My friends, there are so many ways that as followers of Jesus, you and I need a shot of adrenaline. We need an epinephrine injection. Because we get so depressed and so discouraged because following Jesus is hard, and it is. It's full of joy and contentment. It's full of peace and purpose, but it's hard. It's both things at the same time. Your salvation, my salvation, is a finished work and a work in progress at the same time. You cannot sit in the rowboat of salvation and only say, my salvation is done, and row with that oar. You're going to go in circles. You got to use both oars at the same time. You got to have the train on both tracks at the same time, or else it derails. And unless we learn how to do this, unless we figure out how to do this, we're going to live lives of defeat. We're going to live lives of hurt. We're going to live lives that are simply overcome by all the bad things people have said to us, by all the bad things that have been done to us, by all the horrible things we've seen in organized church, by all the Christians who have offended us with their words and their actions, and we're going to be derailed. We're going to find ourselves in a canoe going in circles. We need that shot of adrenaline. We need that epinephrine injected right into our heart. And you remember that how we define the heart around here. When we talk about the heart in light of God's Word, we're not talking about the organ that pumps blood in our bodies. We're talking about that integrated combination of our thoughts, our emotions, and our intentions. That's what the heart is. And our intentions have to drive us in the right direction, or else we're not going to reach the destination. If you go out here and you make a left after you cross the river, you're going to Chicago, not Los Angeles. So God says to Moses, he says, Moses, I want you to teach Aaron this blessing. And I want Aaron and his sons and his grandsons and his great-great-grandsons all the way down to when the temple was ended. The temple system ended when Jesus died and that curtain between the Holy of Holies and everything else was torn from top to bottom. The temple system ended. Thank you, God, for ending the temple system. I really don't want to have to find a turtle dove today to confess my sin. And when that happened, then Jesus opened the floodgates to allow you and me access to the very throne room of God. And in doing so, we listen to this blessing with new understanding, with fresh insight, with a new level of energy, with the shot of adrenaline. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Blessing and grace and peace. Blessing and grace and peace while we run the marathon we call life. God says to us, I'm gonna look at you. I'm going to see you. I'm going to see what's really you. I'm going to see the core of your being, your heart. That integrated combination of your thoughts, emotions, and intentions. I'm going to see all of that. And I'm going to give you blessing and grace and peace. So I ask you, what does your face reflect? Does it reflect all the pain and hardship and struggle that you're having? And some of you are in the middle of it right now. Some of you are in the middle of some of that really bad stuff right now. What does your face reflect? And in no way would I ever discount the pain of terrible life-threatening diagnosis, or a betrayal, or the breakup of relationships, or the loss of a job, or the disappearance of a 401k. Never would I discount that. That pain is real. But I'm telling you, there's somebody who wants to teach you how to live with that pain. He says, take up my cross and follow me. Don't run from suffering. Embrace it. Follow me and I'll show you how. What does your face reflect? What does your face reflect? I'm going to ask Josie to go back to the slide that has the Aaronic blessing on it. I'm going to ask all of you to stand up. And I want us to read this together. I want us to read this in unison. I want you to let those words vibrate in your chest as you say them. All right? There's something really powerful about talking out loud. It's why Paul says that when we come to Jesus to make him the Lord and Master and King and boss of our lives, that we need to do it with our mouth, that we have to exercise our vocal cords, because there's something really powerful about saying this kind of thing out loud. So let's say it together. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen. Amen. Go in peace.